Hey folks, welcome to the interview. It is Peter Catalano here, and I am excited because we get to talk about one of my favorite topics, and that is estate planning. Estate planning can be very simple and it can be very complex. And the question is, what is right for you? So today we have a attorney with us, Jennifer Duplechain. Jennifer, say hello.
Hi, everyone.
And we are going to talk today a bit about estate planning from a legal perspective. So Jennifer, welcome. Real quick about you. I know people haven't seen you on my show before. So tell us a little bit about you. You're from the Houston area, and what's your background?
Well, I actually grew up in Cyprus down to 49, and I went to college in New York. I have a bachelor's in fine art. I have a dental hygiene degree and a law degree, of course.
Wow, fine arts, hygiene, dental hygiene, and law degree.
Yeah.
Talking about diversified person. Wow, that is amazing. And I understand you're a runner too, correct?
Yes. Yep. I'm training for the Disney Marathon next year.
Ooh, that sounds exciting and fun, running over there with Mickey. Well, listen, I know that estate planning is near and dear to your heart. And you're one of the few attorneys that I run into here in the Houston marketplace, or Texas marketplace, really, that is a promoter of trust agreements versus a basic will structure. The logic is, I hear from plenty of attorneys out there, the logic is, well, probate is real easy here in Texas. Not a big deal to go through probate. No reason to have trust agreements. Now, I come from a different mindset, and as a financial advisor, I see things from from a distribution standpoint. You see them from a legal standpoint. So I know we talked about this before. You're kind of the lone wolf, I'm sorry to say. So can you kind of give us an idea of what has you believing in the trust agreements versus a standard will setup?
Well, I will say that you're right about the probate system here in Texas. It is relatively simple compared to some other states. However, a trust provides benefits that a will does not. A will comes into play at death, of course. A trust you can set up now, and it can be working for you during life. So when you put things in the trust now, they're already there. And if for some reason you become incapacitated, your trustee can manage those assets for you. There's already someone in place to hit the ground running and make sure that you and your family are taken care of in the event that you can't take care of them yourself.
Well, let's go through then for those people kind of getting into the estate planning, kind of one-on-one here. I think we should start. Walk us through the basics, right? There's the will, the medical directive, and power of attorney, correct? Those are the basic three documents.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And what can you give us just general overview? What does each document provide? What does it do?
So I'm going to start with the power of attorney. There's many names for it. We call it a statutory durable power of attorney, also known as a financial power of attorney. Okay. So that's a document that appoints someone to manage your finances for you, again, in the event that you're incapacitated. So if you're in a car accident, you're unconscious, you have someone in place to pay your bills and things like that. A medical power of attorney is similar, except this person is going to be making medical decisions for you. So you would appoint someone that you trust, that you want to make those decisions in the event that you can't for yourself.
Okay. So in the power of attorneys, you want to have somebody who has authority to make financial choices, take financial action in the event you are not able to do so. And you want somebody who can say, yes, give them this procedure, no, pull the plug, whichever the case may be, in that medical directive as well. Am I understanding that correctly? Kind of in layman's terms here?
It can be. Usually for the pulling the plug situations, we're looking at a directive to physicians, and that's where you're not appointing anyone. You're speaking directly to your physician, saying, in these certain scenarios, this is what I would like to have done or not done. The medical power of attorney kind of backs that up with an agent to oversee that.
Okay, so it's important to have these three documents, if you will, at least in place. to assign. Now, where does the guardianship of your children, if you have children under 18, young adults or not adults, children, kids, what document helps manage them?
So that would be the declaration of guardian for minor children. And what that does is, again, appoint someone that you trust to look after the children. It can be one person, it can be two people, and you can split it between guardian of the estate and guardian of the person. So if that child has any distributions coming to them from a will, there will be someone in place to manage those assets on their behalf. However, a lot of people are under the impression that that is ironclad, that whoever you pick is going to be the guardian for your child, but you do have to go to court and get that approved by a judge.
Okay, so there's some safety net in there should somebody lose their mind and not be qualified to take care of the kids.
Right. Or if you choose someone who's qualified at that moment and later on becomes unqualified for some reason, then the judge can step in and make a change there.
Got it. So that's the basics, the will, the medical directives, the power of attorney for finance, power of attorney for healthcare, making sure those basic documents are in place.
Yeah.
What's a trust do?
A trust can actually do a lot of those things. You can put a lot of these measures into one document. So let's say I'm the trust maker. I can make a trust for myself that has kind of like a medical power of attorney built into it, a financial power of attorney. It's just a really long document full of instructions that come into play during different scenarios. So if you can imagine something that might happen, we can put it in the trust and we can provide a plan for that. And then it also acts kind of as a will. It talks about your distribution scheme and you can get as detailed as you want. You can say, I want my children to have a certain amount of money. I want it to be used for health, education, and maintenance. You can say, what is health? Is it cosmetic surgery? Is it a heart transplant? Some people don't want their money to be used for extra things. They want it to be used for a college education. They want it to be used for life-saving measures, for things that are going to be beneficial for their children, not necessarily, like I mentioned, cosmetic surgery, or, there are things that are outside of the box that most parents wouldn't really want their money spent on. So we can specify those things.
Sure. As a financial advisor, I have these conversations with my clients all the time. I mean, that's where the value of you and I on our professions on a team standpoint is. A lot of these conversations I can bring forward to the client, and then you can help narrow down and get the legalese around it. I call it, I used to tell people all the time, 18-year-old kid who's, inherited 500 grand is going to wrap that Ferrari 1, 2, 3 times around a tree. I mean, may not be what you're looking to instill in the kid. So the trust agreement, as I understand from what you're saying here, the trust agreement gives a lot more control over distribution. And as I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, please, but you can extend that beyond age 18. You can go into future years if you choose. Is that accurate?
That's correct. And that's one of the great benefits. You can have trust assets in the trust for the child into adulthood forever. And that way it's actually titled under the name of the trustee legally. So if your child is 25, gets into a bad car accident and has a judgment against them, that judgment money is not coming out of the trust. That money is protected for your child's benefit. Same thing if your adult child gets married, later gets divorced, that settlement is not going to involve the trust assets.
Interesting. So as long as the assets, if I understand correctly, are remain separate, remain in trust, those assets can't be attached. It seems that the logic from my perspective seems that the trust has its own entity and it does have its own tax ID number. It operates on its own.
Yes.
So you really, somebody else can't really come after something I don't have.
Right. That's really the main idea.
The basic idea behind it. Back in the day, and I've been doing this about 30 years, back in the day, the estate tax provisions really ramped up the idea of revocable trust, early on, because of an estate tax issue. So would you give us just a brief, kind of high level? How does the estate distribution? It's different now because we have such a large exemption, unified credit, technical term,
Right.
that every people have. But what if they bring that unified credit down? I know there was discussions in Congress as recent as November of last year, where they were thinking, hey, let's bring this unified credit down to a $2 million mark, down from the 11 million per person that we're sent in, and it's indexed, sent in, right now. How could a trust benefit if we see that kind of reduction in the estate tax provisions?
Depending on the type of assets that you have, what I've seen really high-level tax attorneys do is split those assets into different LLCs, especially for real estate. They can assign out portions of that in percentages, which then gives you a sort of tax discount. So it really comes down to the valuation of your assets. The lower you can get the value down, then you can apply more discounts and try to stay within that ultimate tax exemption amount.
Got it. Got it. So one of the other advantages to trust is, in addition to distribution, now we can possibly use them, depending on how the asset structures, we can possibly use them to reduce valuation of your estate. Is what I'm hearing you say. It's
Yes.
one use of different kinds of trust. Well, Jennifer, this has been great starting point. Thank you for the basics on trust agreements. Before we go, what would you recommend, for anybody as a starting point? What, they just call you, or do something online? I mean, why you versus the free document I can get off Google? Because Google knows all, right? And Google knows everything about what I need to do.
Yeah, that's a great question. And of course, I know there's a lot of do-it-yourself forms out there, which, I mean, maybe it's better than nothing. However, the Google forms are not going to ask you questions about your assets, and it's just not going to have the tips and tricks that I might have to set you up better. And it's, the forms are not going to ask you about your family dynamics. There might be considerations if you have children that are not good with money. There's ways to set things up where you can do a bypass trust if you think a spouse might get remarried later and you want to preserve your share of the estate for your children, so that your children don't get accidentally disinherited during a second marriage with subsequent children. There's so many complex things, especially with blended families, that a form isn't going to address.
Got it. So people want to work with you. What's the easiest way to reach out to you?
People can reach out to me at jduplechainlaw.com, and there's a button on the website where they can schedule an appointment to talk to me over Zoom or phone, and then we can go from there.
Fantastic. Well, Jennifer, thank you so very much for spending this time and giving us the basics of the estate planning documents. And I think it just makes sense, no matter what's going on in people's lives, folks, whatever what's going on in your life, get your estate documents in place, get these medical directives in place, get your power of attorney for finances in place. I can't tell you the number of people I run into, never going to die, never going to get hurt. I get it. We're all immortal, and we're all never going to get in a car accident unless you're driving on the 45 on a daily basis. And next thing you know, there's nobody to manage the bank account, or there's nobody to make financial decisions for you. Or I ran into a situation recently where the husband's a truck driver, and he's a young guy, young family, a 5-year-old child. And of course, they're never going to die. They're never going to get hurt. And he ended up in a coma, getting in a truck accident. And the wife was beside herself because it was a little bit challenging. I'll say it nicely. It was a little bit challenging in trying to make these decisions. What makes it really challenging is that there's a high emotional time frame that's happening. Yes. And when we're emotional, we tend to make poor judgments and decisions. And I'm not saying that happened in this case. I'm just saying that's typically what I see is something happens. emotions skyrocket, but we don't have anything in place to balance it. And I think, Jennifer, you bring up, get the basics of the estate done, the basic planning done. And that way, at least you're reducing the amount of potential poor decision making there in that realm
Right.
by having these documents in place. So thank you again for your time. I hope you come back. We'll talk a little more details on different types of trusts. I know you mentioned the bypass here as well. So
Yeah.
if you'll come back, I'd appreciate. And I thank you for your time today.
All right. Thanks for having me, Peter.
No, my pleasure.